Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, production of iHeartRadio.
And we are back with our Women Around the World series. I don't know why I say that like we've taken a break. It's every week, but here we are. Yeah. But you know what? It's been a bit of a rough week for us in the United States. So we wanted to take some time and find a moment to celebrate, including the fact that we've been doing these weekly Women Around the World series for a year and 2 or 3 months now?
Yeah, I think you're right. Because I think it was March we started. Mm-hmm.
Right. We were like, we were going to expand and we want to go beyond. And let's talk about women that we typically don't talk about or people who are femme. And we just really want to celebrate what they're doing and what they've been doing and then acknowledge their work and hopefully bring some light to their work. And you know what? It's been a joy to search out these people, right?
It has. I only hesitate because it was your amazing idea to let my love flourish and to find fictional women who I want to talk about. And I think in my corner of the world, they are not unheard of. But I know for some people, they might be new to you. And I think that some of them we've shown a light on have been kind of rarer talked about characters. Some of them have been huge characters. So I feel like I love it. It was an excellent idea. Thank you. But our experiences are vastly different because I do usually have pretty easy access to information, whether it's in my brain or Wikipedia page, Star Wars Wiki or whatever it is. Like I can find this stuff. But you have a bit of a harder lift.
Well, coming in, trying to find specific types of people who are doing this incredible work has been interesting, especially because, yes, when it comes to U.S. Media, it's really hard to find more outward views. We are very centric, which is sad for me, but it's been a good challenge. But I do say, I love that we have both the combinations of real life people and heroes as well as fictional, because the fictional are the representations that we really drastically need and want and hope to see in real life. Not necessarily like space fighting, maybe, I don't know, maybe 200 years down the road when we're far gone, that exists. Mm-hmm. But, it is nice to see because it brings that level of, for the longest time, not having any of that representation for women in general, and then for marginalized communities, and then just people who identify as completely different, and having these niche loves and likes. And yes, you are a walking encyclopedia of these amazing characters. So I love that you bring that too. Yeah. Especially because the fan bases, they have an attachment that is beyond.
They do. And I speak as someone who does. Yeah. And I think it goes back to a lot of stuff we've talked about that can range from very kind of more serious things to very lighthearted things. I think that's the power of good storytelling, is if you can connect with somebody, and that can be healing. Like, as I've said, for me, it was easier for me to deal with trauma, my own trauma, through a fictional person.
Right.
And that is powerful. And that is why this representation matters. But that's why, people love these characters and they just resonate. And I think that's really beautiful.
Right. And on top of that, yes, when we talk about these amazing people that have created change or continue to create change or continue to advocate for us as a community within this marginalized, being a woman or being a person of color or being in the queer community or disabled, any of those communities that bring it together and just really have a moment to see heroes, true life heroes who is passionate about their work. And I know, not that I'm one of them, but just working in a service industry or social service field, it really is stressful and a lot of pain and aches. And most of the times you rarely see the good. And so we wanted to take this time to acknowledge the good that they are doing and to acknowledge it worldwide, because they deserve that recognition while they're still with us. And we don't want to wait too late to let them know how amazing and how big their contribution truly is and how we see it. And we thank them and give them the flowers virtually.
Yes. So much yes. Yes.
And when these hard times, especially when it feels like the world is attacking, and when I say the world, let's say the powers that be at this point in time, those in power seem to be attacking the rights of women and femme and queer and the marginalized in general. It's hard to sometimes get to the good parts, and we want these times to be the good parts and to recognize people are doing this work. And they've been doing this work, and we have so many examples of people doing this work. And we have generations coming forward who are also doing this work and picking up right where other people have left off. And it's gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, really inspiring because every story you bring on here, Samantha, I feel like I'm always kind of exhausted for them.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. Like, it's hard and often dangerous. And a lot of times there's some traumatic experience behind in their life story, or multiple traumatic experiences in their life story. And it can feel like, I've done all this work and now it's going backwards. But it does matter. It matters so much.
Right.
And to have that strength of will, I'm just glad we're recognizing it.
Yes. We wanted to talk about someone who has been, and like we said, continues to advocate for the marginalized communities around the world, as well as for advocating for peace, which sometimes I forget, like, oh yeah, there's just that general concept of peace, which is so out there. But we are celebrating the works of Shreen Saroor of Sri Lanka. And just a bit on her biography, Saroor was born in Mannar in 1969 with her Muslim family in a neighborhood where Tamils and Muslims resided together. But all that would change after the violent death of a dear family friend who was killed by a militant group that forced many Muslim families out of the town. In 1990, she and her family were forced to flee along with 75,000 other Muslims when war hit their community. Saroor and her family were forced to stay at a refugee camps with other displaced families.
And at the refugee camp, she joined her father, who set up a community organization to assist other refugees. He helped raise funds and also helped teach Saroor the different strategies to organizing grassroots efforts. At the age of 21, her father had died, leaving her to take up his leadership role and support her family by getting a job as a stockbroker. But she would soon continue her advocacy on a larger scale.
Saroor completed her education at the University of Colombo in 1998, which included feminist studies, by the way, and soon began her career in advocating for peace and working for the rights of all in her community. Upon returning to her home, Saroor started working with women's rights activists in her community who were seeking the rights to education as well as the simple human rights in general. She soon started the Mannar Women's Development Federation, which started her path to becoming a, quote, defender of women's rights, according to her interview with unwomen.org.
And that was only the beginning. After watching countless women disappear and struggle during this time, she noticed that the women's activist groups she worked with started to slow down and essentially disappear. So she began the Women's Action Network, or the WAN, in 2009. As it is written for Ashoka.org, which Saroor is a fellow of, she first started it, quote, recognizing the high possibility of a dying movement. Shreen is creating the next generation of young women leaders from representing all identities, Muslim, Tamil, Sinhalese, that are working together to take the women's movement in Sri Lanka from a mere survival mode to the next level of advocating for larger women's rights.
Yes. Saroor gathered 9 women's collectives throughout the country to help provide platforms, mentors, and to address women's issues across the nation. And WAN, quote, not only firefights individual cases against traditional women's issues like domestic violence and war-related issues like enforced disappearance and resettlement, but also advocates at a national and international level for policy reforms. WAN is located in Sri Lanka and is a, quote, collective of women's groups that empowers and advocates for women and women survivors of war, violence, and other injustices.
And with the efforts the organizations have made, one of the big proponents to the organizations is to teach and mentor young activists to become leaders themselves. Saroor is a fierce advocate in including young women and their organizations in activism, so they are, quote, always aware of the state of human rights in their country and take up these issues when they grow up. And with that, she also pushes to empower survivors as well. In an UN interview, Saroor says, a key principle that we abide by is not to take up the place of survivors or to speak on their behalf, but to empower them in their own struggle for justice and to help them only if there is a space to do so and if they want us to. Our intent is not to build an organization, but a women's rights movement. And it is our strong belief that it is only by survivors coming together that strong movements are birthed. We do not own the movements. We do not hold on to them, and we certainly do not take credit for them. This makes Women's Action Network a proud collective of women with their own story interwoven with the issues of women in a post-war context, along with their experiences of resistance and aspirations for the future.
Yeah, I love that. I love that whole idea in general. Of course, she, as being actually from Sri Lanka during the war times, as well as being a refugee, understands the power it is to allow for the survivors to do it on their own pace. And I think that's overall for anybody who's gone through any type of trauma. And she makes sure to hold to that in her policies and in her work as an activist. And that's something we need to remember. And her work has drawn, of course, a lot of accolades and recognitions, including the 2008 Voices of Courage Award from the International Rescue Committee's Women's Refugee Commission in her work for the internally displaced women, the 2011 In Peace Award, the 2017 Franco-German Prize for the Human Rights and the Rule of Land, and in that same year became the Ashoka Fellow that we talked about earlier, which we've mentioned a few Ashoka Fellows. So
we have.
And she was also featured in a 2004 documentary film called Leading the Way to Peace, Women Peacemakers. But yeah, thank you so much, Saroor, for your amazing work. And just seeing her being recognized and continuing in this fight is so powerful.
It is. And I think we've seen a lot. We being Samantha and I specifically, but in a larger scale as well, the power of women in these organizations, in these activist roles and government, and how that it's so important, and how including voices of people who are going to be most impacted or of people who have long been ignored is incredibly vital to building these healthier societies.
Right.
So thank you so much. Flowers to you. We look forward to seeing what else you accomplish. And yeah, as always, if you have any suggestions of people or organizations we should shout out in these segments, please let us know. You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram at Stuff Mom Never Told You. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina.
An amazing woman as well.
Mm-hmm. And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Mom Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.